What is up, everybody? Welcome. And today I'm going to be making my 17 lands tier list for Pioneer Masters. Usually I get around to doing this like, I don't know, a week or so earlier than I am for this set. I am recording this video on the Friday after the set comes out. Usually I make this list like the weekend before the set comes out, but I got caught up with some other content things and didn't get around to it till now. I also usually don't record this process, but I figured it might be kind of fun to watch. Might be kind of fun just hearing me talk out some thoughts. A few things before we get in. One, I'm of course going to post the link to this tier list in the video description down below. You can see the final product. At least at the time of recording, I do update my tier list as the set goes on and as I play more, but no matter when you're watching, that link below is always going to lead you to the most recent update. Second, just a few notes on how my tier list works. As you can see, the template here, we're using the 17 lands A to F letter grading system, so that's what we're going to be working with. If you want a bit of a deeper explanation, if you're not as acquainted as some folks might be with that letter grading system, feel free to tag me in the comments. I'm happy to hash out some details. Let's talk about settling on a grade, how I actually grade the cards. So I use a mix of my own play experiences and win rate data from 17 lands. If I have less experience with a card, I will tend to defer to what 17 lands says. And on the other side of things, if there's a card that I have played with a lot, especially a card that maybe isn't performing super well in 17 lands, and I feel like maybe I'm using it in a way that other people aren't, or pairing it with certain cards that other people aren't to make it better than, what the 17 lands data says, I'll of course talk about that. One big thing I want to stress about this is that the grade system is imperfect. It can't capture nuance very easily. Ideally, I'd be making a tier list for like every single archetype to give you a more granular idea of how good certain cards are in different places. And so the grades here, and I think, the main point of a tier list, what people use it for, is not pinpoint accuracy, but directional correctness. Hopefully you'll highlight where you might be wildly overrating or underrating certain cards. And then lastly, just I'm sure some people are going to be wondering this, I'm not going to be grading the cards on the spell or devotion bonus sheets, as we haven't played with those yet. Those are going to be, a few weeks time. We're currently using the Planeswalker bonus sheet. I will be covering those cards. I'm sure I'm going to make some content in future weeks about those other bonus sheets as they rotate in. And they're also going to be added to the tier list as we get to play with those cards. Okay, so let's get into it. We're just going to go in Wooburg order here. The vibe you can expect from this is going to be pretty laid back. I'm not going to be going super in depth on every single card. That would be like a 3-hour video. This is very much just me being like, yeah, this is about this. I'll call out cards that I think might surprise people as being worse or better than the grade that I end up giving the card. A lot of them are going to be like, yeah, this is about a C, about a B. I'll just go, top to bottom here, starting with Chained from the Rocks, which is a red, white, gold card, essentially, but a very, very good one if you're able to cast it. A 1-mana Banishing Light, that's really nice. Celestial Archon's been pretty good, too. A bit of a, it's a blast from the past. This is one of the ones that used to be a rare back in the day. I found it to be, like, slightly above average filler. In just like any white deck. And by the way, I've liked the white decks, like red-white aggro, blue-white flyer has been pretty good, green-white aggro has been good. I guess black-white probably the deck that I've liked the least, but I've also like seen some pretty good black-white decks. Artful Maneuver, combat trick, a fine one. There's a lot of really good combat tricks in this set, so I'm gonna rate it pretty low, to be honest. Ardenvale Tactician, a one that I've liked quite a bit, probably about that C+ range as well. Archway Angel, really good for the gate stack. I'd put that about, build around or synergy B-. Let's add the little synergy tag there. War Oracle up next. This is one that I think has not stood the test of time. Was kind of a premium uncommon, honestly, back in Origins, Magic Origins, but it was super aggressive, and just having like anything with lifelink really felt like cheating. So I'm gonna put that in the D tier. Triplicate Spirits, I think, is still held up. Make 3 spirits, convoke. Somewhere between the B- and the C+ range. I think I'm going to just land it in the C+ range. Don't want to get too overzealous with the high grades. There's a lot of pretty powerful cards in the set. Syndicate Messenger, not one of them. Another one that's kind of not stood the test of time. I'm going to put that in the D range. Archangel of Thune. Yeah, this card is nutty good. It kind of just depends. Do you want to give this A+ or an A? And I think it's probably closer to an A than an A+, though. If you can build a deck where you trigger the life gain immediately, and then, even if this gets killed, you still get a little something, I think it could, you consider in the A range. In any case, you're taking this out of any pack. It doesn't really matter too much. Swift Reckoning, kind of a, medium removal spell. Good in your flyer decks. Not really good anywhere else. Steward of Solidarity. This card's been fine. Nothing too over the top, but a good 2-drop. Just, 2/2 that has decent value in the late game. I'm going to plop that in the C range if I can get it in there. There we go. Stasis Snare has been just a really good removal spell. One of the best removal spells in the format, honestly. There's actually not a ton of awesome removal. Not to say that the removal's bad or anything, but it's not like flying around the table. You know, you do have to take your premium removal spells when you see them pretty early. So, yeah. Stasis Snare, one of those that I'm happy to take pretty early. Tragic Arrogance. Oh man, this is a card. This one actually they upshifted to Mythic. This was a rare. Yeah, this is great. Basically, you just choose their worst stuff. You choose your best stuff, and it's not exactly a field wipe, but in a lot of situations, it is better than a field wipe because you get to still keep your awesome, whatever, 5-mana card. They're stuck with like a 1/1 token or something. So a asymmetrical Wrath, if you want to look at it that way. So yeah, I'm gonna put that, I think, in the B+ range. Shoulder to Shoulder, I don't believe that card is draftable. I think that's on the bonus sheet. Reprisal, same thing. I think these are on the spell bonus sheets. Yep, same thing. Open the Armory. Starfield of Nyx. Is this like a straight F? So this is like a enchantment build around. I think to get to the number of enchantments you need to make this a viable card, you have to play like a lot of the bad bestow creatures. A lot of the bestow creatures are not particularly strong. So I'm going to put that as an F. You know, feel free to argue with me on that one in the comments if you've had a 6 Starfield of Nyx deck come together. Spirit of the Labyrinth is more of a sideboard card than anything. Like, it's mostly just going to be a 3/1. I mean, you could play it as a somewhat functional Magic the Gathering card, but I think I'm going to put that in the sideboard. Again, if I can. There we go. I know there's an easier way to do it, too. You can just go, oops, sideboard, but where's the fun in that, you know? Sphere of Safety. I've actually had quite a few people play this card on me, and it is really good against some decks. You know, if they're really, really going wide, Sphere of Safety will do a thing, even if it's just like the sphere itself being the only enchantment. That being said, I still think it is an F, or, you know, if you wanted to get picky about it, I suppose you could call it a sideboard card. It's probably a card you should consider out of your sideboard against like a go wide deck if you already have enough enchantments, but I don't really think you want to like build around this card or anything like that. Oath of Gideon, essentially 3 mana to make 2 1/1s. That is not a particularly playable card. I think I'm gonna put it in like the D range. You know, maybe I'm being charitable there, because if you've got a Planeswalker, it's got a little bit of added bonus, but you know, I don't think you should really put that card in your deck. Next up is Silk Wrap, and I'd call this kind of like dead average. It answers cheap stuff. Better if you're a controlling deck than if you're an aggressive deck. Because, you know, often in your controlling decks, the play pattern is like, play my removal spells first, and then play my big finishers, big creatures to kill you. In an aggro deck, it's reversed. So if you care about killing these small things, you know, Silk Wrap gets the job done. But if you're an aggro deck looking to get the big blockers out of the way, not as good. And most of the control decks in this format, or sorry, most of the white decks in the format are not controlling. So I'm going to put Silk Wrap at a C. Sungrace Pegasus up next. If you've got ways to enchant this, if you've got ways to get, you know, make it bigger somehow, you know, it's a fine filler card, but you really do need, I think, a lot of ways to enchant this, make it big to be anything. If it's just sitting there as a 1/2 flyer, that's just not exactly good enough for this format. Hushwing Griff is another card that I think is on the bonus sheet. Essentially just a 3 mana 2/1 flyer. Maybe messes up the opponent once in a while. If you can have a deck where you have literally no enter the battlefield effects, or things that care about creatures entering the battlefield, because, like, you know, if you have a creature that says, when a creature enters the battlefield, do a thing, this also shuts that off. Like, I could see this as like a 23rd card, but, you know, most of the time you're going to have cards in your deck that, you know, will also be shut off by this. So I think I'm going to put this in the low D range. Again, if you want it to be charitable, you can maybe put it in the sideboard grade. But, yeah, we won't spend too much time on that. Sage's Reverie is an interesting one. So I think that if you've got Heliod's Pilgrim, which is the 1/2 that goes and gets an aura, and you're like all in on, yes, like I'm doing the aura things, and this is just like part of your toolbox to go get, you know, a way to fill up, I think it's a playable card there. But that's like super, super niche. So I'm going to give that like a synergy grade. And, you know, even still, it's still like a filler card, one of your 20 to 23rd cards. So I'm going to give it the honorable grade of build around or synergy D+. Elspeth's Sun Champion, one of the best cards you can open. That one's going straight up to the A range. Again, this is probably between A and A+. Honestly, I'd probably give it the A+, because it just stabilizes you immediately, making 3 1/1 tokens, and, you know, you're going to win the game very, very quickly after Elspeth comes down. There's also not that many ways to kill Planeswalkers in the set. Sure, there's Dreadbore. Maybe there's 1 or 2 other things that are escaping me right now. But most of the time, when your opponent's killing a Planeswalker, they have to either burn it out or actually attack it. Oh, I guess there's also the black Awaken removal spell, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Yeah, that card will also kill it. Call of the Gatewatch is sort of interesting. So I don't think you should play this card unless you've got like the best planeswalker. So Elspeth Sun's Champion or Jace Memory Adept, the one that just, mills your opponent, kills them in like 2 or 3 turns. And even then, it's probably not an auto include. I would include this card if you've got one of those awesome planeswalkers and your 20 to 23rd card is not great, right? You're just like, it's kind of filler. Doesn't really, not an exciting card. The thing about this kind of card, if you've never played with like a tutor that goes against a specific thing, is that, or just like any tutors in general, but you're adding on mana to the card you're going to get, right? So if you're like, Elspeth Sun Champion, that card is excellent. Would I pay 6 mana for it? Of course. Would I pay 9 mana for it in installments? Yeah, probably with Elspeth, but, if you have a lesser Planeswalker, one of the ones we're going to get to, a Johnny Steadfast, fine card. It's a good card. But it's not just going to win the game when you resolve it most of the time. I would not play Call the Gatewatch in that case if it was just going to get in Johnny. So I'm going to give it, like, the same kind of thing, the honorable grade of Synergy D. Maybe even Synergy D-, because, that is kind of like a worst case scenario. My last cards aren't great, and I fulfilled a specific condition. Silence, that one just can go straight to F. This is not a playable limited card. No, thank you. A Johnny, yeah. So a Johnny's a nice one. 4 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker, buffs your things. If you're going really wide, buffs all your things. Yeah, not a over-the-top, like, slam dunk walker, but I think a walker in the B+ range. That seems good to me. All right, Sajiri Shelter. Yeah, I really like this one. So all the white decks, to some degree, the aggressive white decks anyways, are generally looking to like build up one creature or, put an aura on it, put a bestow creature on it. In any case, you often have like some important threat of flyer that you would like to keep attacking the opponent. And just having this like as one of your lands, essentially one of your 17 lands, is a really nice upgrade to a basic land. Do be careful though, because this is protection. So if you have targeted your creature with a black bestow creature, a Night Howler, and your opponent goes to Obnixis's Cruelty, your creature, and you go protection from black, your Night Howler will fall off, right? Because protection also says you can't be enchanted by whatever color you've called, so the enchantment will actually fall off. So do be careful about that. But yeah, I really like Sajiri Shelter. Going to put it in the C+ range. Secure the Waste is up next. Pretty good rare. Definitely better in a, like a splashed card in a control deck than in an aggro deck. But a playable card in an aggro deck for sure. Like, you really want this to be X = 5 or X = 6 if you can. Not to say that you're not going to get there in your aggro deck sometimes. But if you have a deck that's built to get to 6, 7, 8 mana, a Gates deck or something, that's where it's at its best. So this is actually one of the cards that I'm going to give a little bit of a higher grade than 17 Lands is giving it. Right now, let me just go check. 17 Lands has this as at a 56.9 win rate, which is good. It's an above average card. But if you're to map it onto a grade, that's basically like a C+ ish. And like I said, I think if I'm to draft this card, where I would draft this card, where I would want to pair it with is in a slower deck. And I assume part of that grade is it being dragged down by people putting it in like, the red-white aggro deck. So I'm going to give Secure the Waste a comfortable B. Phalanx Tactics is up next. It's fine. Like, if you kind of know when you want it, when you're going wide. I don't think it's just like a good pump spell where you're like, I'm a heroic deck, I want to put pump spells in my deck. I think you really have to be going wide, making tokens somehow. I like this card with the red 1-drop. Let's see if I can just find that real quickly. There's the red heroic 1-drop that whenever you target it, it makes a 1/1. I can't find it right now, but I'm sure we'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, I like it at that. That card's been kind of overperformer for me. Bit more of an engine-y. Like, I'm actually pumping out a lot of tokens than I might have expected. So yeah, if you're that kind of deck, Phalanx Tactics can make the cut. But I think I would give it kind of like a general D+. Not a card I'm super excited to put in my deck. Phalanx Leader up next. And this has been a pretty strong card, pretty scary card, but also awkward in a few ways. Like, you have to be a heavy white deck so that you can cast the white, even if you're casting on turn 4. It's awkward sometimes because I've had situations where I want to be like, well, I want to cast this leader and cast my white combat trick. I can't do that. And, just anytime you've got double pips. These cards are a little bit more awkward than they might seem on first glance. And you have to be going wide to some degree. I mean, if you've just got, 3 creatures in the battlefield, you target your leader, put 3 counters and stuff, yeah, that's okay. It's not too bad. But I think to be taking full advantage of this card, you have to be going wide. So I'm sort of going to give it a synergy grade just because mana requirements and really excels in certain decks. And I think when you're there, it's really good. Like, if you are a go wide deck, I really do like Phalanx Leader. I'm going to put that in the Synergy B- range. But yeah, do be careful on those, both the mana and the kind of deck you're putting it in. Mentor of the Meek is, I think, an overrated card, just in general. I think anytime we've seen this card, people have high expectations of it, and it never turns out to be quite as good as people might expect. I think that it's fine. I think where you want this card is like a black-white deck that's taking its time, it's making tokens, it's not winning quickly, it doesn't mind playing a 3-mana 2/2. Again, a lot of the white decks in this format are more aggressive, looking to get the game over with. You don't want to spend your turn 3 doing this. So, I think I'm not going to quite give it like a synergy or a build-around grade. I'm just going to give this one a grade of, maybe like a C. But if this is one that you're taking really highly, I'd probably bump it down a little bit. Lotus Eye Mystics is kind of an interesting one because in a deck where you've got, 8 enchantments, 9 enchantments, like, it's a pretty good card. You draw a enchantment creature out of your graveyard. It's prowess. Obviously, it's the thing that wants to be enchanted. And when I say it's a pretty good card, I mean, like, it's slightly above average if you've got the deck for it. So I'm going to give this one a synergy grade, probably like a synergy C. If you've got, again, like kind of those 9, 10 targets for it. Not a card that I think you're going to put in your deck very often. It's kind of hard to get there, even with enchantment creatures. Linvala is up next, and this is another one that I think I'm going to give a little bit of a lower grade than people might expect. If you are a controlling deck, a gates deck, even like a blue-white flyer deck, this card's gonna be pretty good. But if you're a red-white aggro deck or a green-white aggro deck, you don't really want a 6-mana card. That might just be a 5/5 flyer. And the thing is, if you're an aggro deck, you don't really even care about the 5 life very much. You care about the 3/3 flyer, but a lot of the time, you're actually just gonna have more creatures than the opponent. So, yeah, this one is, it's a strong card. Undoubtedly, really strong card. Linvala is gonna get you out of spots that, games you would have no chance of winning. Your opponent's going to play this, and they're going to gain 5 life and make a 3/3, and you're going to like, oh my god, that was so good. To give you a little bit of context, I just looked it up. 17 Lands has this at a 55.7 game in hand win rate, which is, again, like a slightly above average card. I'm going to put it in the B- tier, just giving credence to, I assume people will put this in the right spot, a slower deck. Actually, I'm even going to put it right here. Better in control. Just to really spell it out. Because, yeah, I think you don't want to be taking this card very highly for those aggro decks. Imposing Sovereign, I'm just kind of taking, going cards randomly at this point. But Imposing Sovereign is an okay 2-drop, a little bit annoying. But the 2/1 body, I'm pretty unimpressed with that. Gonna put that in, like, maybe even the D range. I haven't found that card to be all that exciting. Laguna Band Trailblazer, a fine card for your heroic decks. Put it kind of like C- here. Kythian's a nice one. Just a 1-mana 2/1 that gains indestructible, turns into a planeswalker pretty easily. Yeah, I like Kythian. I'll give Kythian a B. Knightly Valor. So I think Knightly Valor is a card that, so far anyways, that I've only played when I've got Heliod's Pilgrim. And I've talked about that card twice already, so we should probably just take a look at Heliod's Pilgrim. There we go. Heliod's Pilgrim, the 3-mana 1/2, goes and gets an aura from your deck. Notably, cannot go get bestow creatures. It's just aura cards. Bestow creatures are creatures when they're in your deck. So yeah, I really like this as just a good thing to go get, a good aura to go get. I played it once when I was just a little bit low on targeting things in a red-white heroic deck, but generally I want my things that target to be cheaper than this. So I think it's like a green-white card a lot of the time. Another card that I'm going to put a little bit higher than 17 Lands has. It's currently 52.6 win rate, which is really bad. That's like close to an F pretty much. But I have not found that to be the case when I've got like Pilgrim and I care about enchantment sometimes. So I'm going to give this one like a synergy C-, I think is probably what I'm going to note. Nice target to get with Heliod's Pilgrim. And then, yeah, let's just grade Heliod's Pilgrim here. Yeah, this has been the card I've been pretty happy with. It's good, like I said, good in green-white mostly. I've played it sometimes in red-white, but just like I said with the Mentor of the Meek, you don't really want to be playing like a 3-minute 1/2 on turn 3. A little bit more for like a green-white deck that doesn't mind going, a little bit longer. So C+ for that. Ghostblade Eidolon, I haven't found to be great. Both sides of this card, like 3-mana 1/1 double strike and 6-mana double strike aura, not particularly impressive. So I'm gonna put that in like the D+ range. I mean, if you've got like a lot of ways to pump your creatures, then it can kind of be a vessel for that. I like seeing it more as the 3-mana version than the 6-mana version. But it's not like some key card for the heroic decks or anything like that. None of the White Orchid, again, this is going to be very much just like the other white card I talked about, Phalanx Leader. This one's going to be very much dependent on your mana base. This one even more so, because unlike the leader, where you can target it and pump your team in the late game, this is just getting you a land, which is only good early in the game. So to be comfortable playing Knight of the White Orchid, you have to be pretty much mono white, or have I'd say like 12, 13 white sources in your deck. And I'm going to put a little bit of note on that, just like 12 white sources min. And if you're there, great. Yeah, it's an above average card. I would put that about a C+. But don't try to put this in your like 2-color decks that are 9/8. If you're not casting this card on turn 2 or turn 3, then you're not going to be happy with it. Keen Apparition, kind of a fine filler 2-drop. Going to put that at a D. Kabira Takedown. Kabira Takedown's a nice one. One of the better MDFCs. I like that at like a B- perhaps. Another one that I see a little bit more as like a green-white card than a red-white card. The green-white, obviously putting it on a big green creature is kind of nice. Lifelink on a 4/4 on a Rhino. The 4/4 that when you target draw a card, like that's always kind of nice. Another card that's a little bit less good in like a red-white aggro deck, where you mostly care about as much power, pumping out as much power as you possibly can as early as you can. But I'm not going to be too specific on this one. I think I'm just going to give it a C+. Just a general grade. Next up, we've got Hero of Iroas. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting one to talk about. Next up, we've got Hero of Iroas, and I think this is just like the 2-drop you're looking for in your heroic decks. I've just been, really happy about this, giving you a big mana discount sometimes on your bestow creatures, or not a big discount, but over multiple things that it discounts, it can net you multiple mana is kind of what I'm getting at. So yeah, another one just like rock solid, bread and butter for those kind of decks. Gonna plop it at C+. And by the way, that was another one that was a rare originally back in, I want to say, Born of the Gods, and then got downshifted to uncommon for some master set, and now is that common. All right, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. This is another easy A+. This is kind of tough, because I think that where Elspeth Sun Champion is just like awesome no matter when you cast her, Gideon does get a little bit worse if you draw this in like turn 7, turn 8. It's pretty much unbeatable if you just play it on turn 4 on curve. So, I think I'm actually probably going to give the nod to just like when you cast this on turn 4, it's very close to unbeatable. Put it in that A+ range. And, that's a little bit too high. Might be a little bit too high, but yeah, I do not think I've ever beaten a Gideon on curve in Limited. I played against that card a lot back in the day. Battle for Zendikar. Extricator of Sin is a weird one. I think it's a black-white card. It's, the same thing I've been saying over and over and over. It's like a slow card that, most of your white decks don't really want. But, if you're turning your Afterlife creatures into 3/2s, you can make 2 of them off of, each like 2/1 Vigilant Afterlife 1 creature. The Oligarch, those turn into 3/2s. Like, this is a pretty good deal. So, I'm going to give this a Synergy in black-white. Synergy C+. I'm sure there's some other applications for it, not specifically black-white, but that's where I'm most seeing it as a real card. Dictate of Heliod. This is another excellent one. Just flash Anthem. That, not quite an A+, but I think deserves the A. This card either just like wins the game on the spot, or just makes creature combat impossible for the rest of the game. So as long as you've got enough creatures in your deck, that card's going to be very good. And the last one here, I think all these are on the bonus list. Yep. Compulsory Rest. Compulsory Rest has kind of been just okay. It's worse pacifism, and pacifism I wouldn't give a super high grade to in this set. So yeah, I think this is kind of like, C- level removal. It's nice if you can go get this off of Heliod's Pilgrim. I will say I have prioritized this card higher than a C+ if I've got Heliod's Pilgrim. Just making your Pilgrim a toolbox of being like, do I want to go get a cheap aura, like an Audacity? Do I want to get an impactful, expensive one, like Valor? Do I want to get a removal spell? Like, building out that package is nice and would bump that card up for me. But in general, I think it's just, Sorcery Speed is an enchantment. Can get blown out. They gain 2 life. Like, a lot of small things they don't love. All right, on to blue. And this is taking a little bit longer than I expected. So I'm going to kind of see if I can move right along here. Zephyr Winder. Yeah, it's been kind of a fine 2-drop your blue-white flyer deck. Windrider Patrol. This one I have not found to be very good. It's very much suffers from the 5 mana, no ETB, no protection. And I generally try to not put that card in my deck. Treasure Cruise, though. Treasure Cruise is one that, again, here's one that I think the 17 land stats are going to disagree with me a little bit on. Currently, Treasure Cruise is sitting at like 55 game in hand win percentage, which, again, is a slightly above average card. I should note, when I say slightly above average, I'm comparing this to the 17 land overall user base, what their average win rate is. And for this set, it's like 54% win rate. It's generally hovers around 54. So if you're thinking, oh, 55, that's above average, like that's above 50. I'm comparing this to how 17 lands users are, how much they're winning, not just like, 0 to 100, what's the average there. So looking for how good is the card, if you're just looking just generally on 17 lands, you're going to want to see like 54 and above. That's an above average card. Treasure Cruise is there, but I think it's even better than the slightly above average that it's saying here. It's a build around card. I've seen a lot of Treasure Cruises being cast for like 6 mana, 5 mana. You really want to play this card when you've got Philology Archaeologist, for example. It's the 2 mana mill some cards, get a spell back from those milled cards, and you want to just ways to fill up your graveyard. Usually blue is fairly good at doing this through like Consider, the 1 mana cantrip, but I think a lot of people are putting this card in their deck without ways to turbo fill their graveyard. You don't need to like turbo fill it, but you need a little bit of grease on the wheels. So I'm gonna give this like a synergy grade, probably a synergy B-, because it's very powerful card. If you not there, if you are really supporting it. Tidebinder Mage, pretty good card. Again, you want to be a heavy blue deck to be able to cast a blue 2-drop. So I'm going to put it at a C, I think, and, understanding that you need to be in a certain deck. Temporal Trespass is a time walk that has you delving a lot of cards. 8 blue. So there's a 11 mana card. So I think everything I just said about Treasure Cruise, you can kind of say about Trespass. And, it's not even clear this is the better effect. Treasure Cruise, forget about the blue, which is harder. If this was just like, 8 mana, or sorry, I guess like 10 mana and a blue, is that a better card than Treasure Cruise? I think probably no. I think it's a really big delve cost, and most of the time, I think that like drawing 3 cards is going to be better than taking an extra turn. It's the whole time walk versus ancestral recall debate from Vintage Cube. In any case, this one is definitely a synergy card. Like you need to be building around it, as in you need to have a lot of self mill. And I think I just did it again. I put the C in the wrong place. I think if you're there, it's gonna be about a C. Tall Crop Skirmisher. This card's been kind of dorky. It's a filler card if you are self-milling a bunch, but nothing too special. Stormtide Leviathan is an interesting one. I actually haven't played with this one. I wonder if 17 lands has enough data on it to give me a bit of a pulse. It's an 8-drop that stabilizes you when it comes down, which is nice. Like, whenever you have an 8-mana spell, it better either win the game on the spot or stabilize you extremely well, and Stormtide does. I'm not going to write it off completely. Like, it's a fine way to spend 8 mana if your deck is set up to spend 8 mana. It looks like 17 lands, not quite the sample size needed to show a average game in hand win rate just yet. I think I'm gonna give this like a build around, as in 4 control decks. Like it's got build around C+. Like when you cast your 8 mana spell, it's gonna probably do good things, win you the game. 8 mana, no matter what, even if your deck is built to get to 8 mana, it's always a big cost. So that might even be overrating it a little bit. Maybe I should just bump that down to C. Salundi Vision, one of the nice MDFCs, one of the ones that I do like in certain decks, like especially if you have spell triggers, like Murmuring Mystic is a card we're gonna get to here. This one, like if you've got Murmuring Mystic, I like Salundi Vision a lot. Just a spell that finds you another spell. Oh, also, actually, one little thing, I've talked about this card a little bit. Just gonna hover over it right now because I'm sure I'm going to be talking about it a few other times. Philology Archaeologist. So this is a card, like this is one of blue's better commons. It's a card that I like in basically all my blue decks, whether I'm a flyer deck, just want to come up the ground, or you're self-milling, or you're spell heavy. One of the things with Archaeologist is that this makes me want to play MDFCs, the split land cards, a little bit more than I might usually, because then you have the optionality of your Archaeologist getting you a land from the milled pile some amount of the time. So that's kind of nice. Anyways, like I said, I like Salundi Vision. I'll give that one a C+. Sight Beyond Sight, another card I like quite a bit. Double triggers your spells matters things, your prowess things. So another one I'm just going to give a C +2. Shipbreaker Kraken I have not liked. I think this card is just big and dumb and not very good. So is this an F? I don't know. I don't think it's quite an F, maybe. This is the one I'm going to consult 17 lands on. I wouldn't be surprised if it was performing in the F range, because yeah, it's just a 6/6 vanilla that needs a lot more mana to do anything. Yeah, it's not quite in the F range, but like, yeah, somewhere in the D range, which is kind of what I would have guessed. Scatter the Winds, fine counterspell. Give that about a C. The Awaken on that is, minor upside, not huge upside. Hybridization, not a playable card. You do not want to give your opponent a 3/3. Quicken. Quicken is a card that has a few applications. Like if you've got a field wipe, one of the best uncommons in the set being Gates Ablaze, which is the gate, cares about how many gates you have, deals X damage to that, to all creatures. Quicken into Gates Ablaze is kind of nice. All right, it's just kind of, let me see if we can find a highlight. Yeah, right here, Gates Ablaze. Quicken into Gates Ablaze is kind of a nice little thing. If you have any amount of delve, just this filling your yard. So it's it's a cute little card. It's never going to be awesome or anything, but once in a while you're gonna draw it and you're gonna be like, oh, I can instant speed my sweet sorcery, and it's a pretty low cost card to put in your deck. Again, sometimes you just want the cantrip for your blue spells deck, your prowess deck, so it does enough little things that I think I'm just gonna give it a C. I liked Opalite Gatekeepers, if you're the gate deck, so synergy C plus for that one. Nimbus Naiad is not one I've liked. I think it's just way too inefficient. I think this is, both sides of this card. I mentioned a lot of kind of crappy bestow creatures. This is definitely one of them. I'm gonna give this one a D minus. Nimbus of Frost, one of the best cards in the set. This one not gonna get a D minus. This one's in fact going to get an A. Card is excellent. Murmuring Mystic, same thing. Not gonna get quite an A, but probably a B plus. Yeah, this card is excellent. Mizium Skin, I haven't really found this card to be very good. Whatever. D, mid-level protection spell. Master Wave is good. Doesn't need any building around. You cast this card, you get 2/2/1s. Obviously, it gets better the more cheap blue permanents you have. But just on its own, it's a good card. I think, the ceiling of the card is somewhere like an A if you're like a mono blue deck with a lot of things. The floor on it, it's like a C. So I'm going to kind of average that out to a B minus there. Jawari Disruption, another pretty good MDFC. Just going to give that a C plus. Jessian Thief, I have never seen this card connect. I've seen this card on the battlefield many, many times. I don't think it's drawing a single card for my opponents. So, it's not a card that I've been very interested in playing. So let's give the old D. Maybe D minus is a little bit rough. I'll give it the D. Jace's Prodigy. Yeah, right. Jace's Prodigy is a pretty good 2-mana looter. Turns into a planeswalker, a good planeswalker at that. So we'll give Jace a B plus, a B. Yeah, I think it probably, I think you can turbo this out, like flip it on turn 3 or 4 some amount of the time through the self-mill card. So, we'll include that as part of the range. Folks who played, small aside here, folks who played in that standard where Jace's Prodigy was legal, you might remember how expensive that card was. It was like a $150 card at some point or something. Anyways, Ingenious Scab, been kind of fine filler, C minus. Illusory Angel, slightly better filler. I'd say maybe a C plus or C. This is the kind of card that you want to pair with Quicken or consider just like a cheap cantrip. Gust of Wind. Gust of Wind has been awesome. I really, really like Gust of Wind. So this card is, a variant of the 3 mana, bounce a thing, draw a card. The fact that this can be 2 mana sometimes, and I've actually found it pretty reliably 2 mana. Obviously Blue's got a good handful of flyers, but even something just like a Pilgrim's Eye, having that around to, if you're like a Gates deck or something, or, similarly, if you're a Gates deck, usually my Gates decks are blue-green base. So if you have, let's see, can I find it here quickly? Skyrider Elf. Yeah, this thing. Casting this on turn 2, making it a 2/2, having Gust available as a 2-mana spell has felt really, really good. So I'm going to give Gust a B minus, maybe. It's maybe a bit generous, but when I'm playing this card and drafting this card highly, when I've got 8-9 flyers, it is that good. So if you're just casting it as a 4-mana card, I think it's about a C. I'll probably give this the average grade of C plus just to kind of even things out. But just do want to point out that when it's good, it's really, really good. Guild Summit. I was sort of a non-believer in this card before I played with it, a bunch more. And, I played this card in the past when it first came out in Guilds of Ravnica. And the Gates deck in Guilds of Ravnica was not particularly good. RNA, Ravnica Allegiance is when it got really good. I think I just had kind of like memories of poor experiences with this card. But yeah, this card's just drawn me so many cards. Same with my opponents too. Part of this is that I feel like right now the Gates deck is more open than it should be. Like, I'm seeing Gates Wheeling. I'm seeing the good Gate payoffs, like Gate Colossus and Gate Breaker Ram and Gates Ablaze going like 5th, 6th, 7th pick. So, you know, the better your Gates deck is, the better Guild Summon's going to be. But I'm going to give it the Synergy C+. Yeah, it's a really good draw spell in those decks. Archaeologist. Yeah, this one I'm just going to give a C+. Just the glue to so many of the blue decks, like I mentioned. Scatter. Yeah, same thing. Just a good cheap counterspell. Days Undoing. This one we can put in the F range. Crush of Tentacles is, it's a funny one. So this card is not very good unless you're setting it up and building around it. And what I mean by setting it up, number one, is having cheap spells to cast it. Because if you're not surging it and getting the Octopus, it's not good. So you need to be like, consider into this card, or 2-mana spell into this card on 7. Or if you're able to continuously bounce there's the blue-black, what's this thing called? The blue-black, when it enters, you can rebuy a spell from the graveyard. A creature, instant, or sorcery. It's the blue-black common. I'm sure we'll get to it here eventually. Possess Scob. This is the one, right? You can kind of do some cool things with this, where like, you know, you keep bouncing all your stuff, and then you can recast this, and you know, you just keep bouncing the board each turn. If you're making, if you're able to make an 8/8 in the process, you know, obviously you're pulling far ahead, but if you've made an 8/8, then you can't rebounce again. But anyway, I just wanted to call out that this is kind of an interesting card when you have Crush of Tentacles. Does some pretty good things, but I also want to call it that Crush Tentacles not very good if you're not enabling it with cheap spells. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one like build around C. Like when you can do the thing, it's pretty good. Wants cheap spells. But if you're not getting the token, I think it's quite bad. Consider up next. I know it does good stuff for spells decks, surging, filling the graveyard. So yeah, I think just a solid C for the Consider. Cloudfin Raptor is an interesting one. It's a powerful card. This could be like a 1-mana 4/3, right? But you do really have to be, I think, in, I guess, the flyer deck, like blue-white, or is there any other place that I would really want to play this? Because I'm trying to think of it. It has to be a blue deck that is consistently playing creatures and wants to kill the opponent. And that could be blue-red, but your creature density in blue-red's probably not going to be good enough. So I think it's mostly just a blue-white card. And if you're there, yeah, it's good. It's a really good card. I'm going to put this as a synergy in blue-white. You know, it's kind of like rough. I can see decks where it's not specifically in a blue-white deck and it's pretty good. But I think most of the time, like I'm really calling this out because I've seen a lot of people play the card in decks where it's just not very good. Like they're not going to trigger it very often. They've got 12 creatures, a lot of non-creature spells. So yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction. Haven't found Chasm Skulker to be particularly good. It's a 3-mana 1/1 that takes a lot of time to grow. I don't think it's a terrible card or anything. But it is definitely a build around. You can't just have it like sit there and be like, well, I'm putting a counter on each turn. You want to be considering and quickening and treasure cruising and stuff. So I'm going to give it a build around C, maybe C+. Yeah, probably a bit closer to build around C+. But yeah, not a card that I think you can just throw into any deck. Same with Brineborn Cutthroat. Pretty good. I would kind of liken this to the Cloudfin Raptor, where, you know, it's pretty good if you can enable it. And this set probably enables it better than Foundations did. So if you're looking at like, oh, how does Brineborn Cutthroat? Yeah, I just played in Foundations and it was okay. It's a little bit better than this set. I think it's easier to enable. So I'm gonna give that a build around C+2. Biden Nathassa, yeah, kind of a clunky way to draw cards. Not a huge fan of this. Kind of a D+. Artisan of Forms have not found to be particularly good. It's just, yeah, kind of finicky. You know, your blue decks don't target all that much. They don't target their own creatures all that much. I don't think this is a card that you should really play. Maybe I just haven't seen it, you know, in the right home. Maybe there's something cool you can do with it. But just the overlap of it being hard to enable and the payoff not being great, yeah, not great. Probably a lot of the same things I said about Cloudfin Raptor are going to be true about this, where you do really have to be aggressive, and not all blue decks are aggressive. But if you were like a blue-white, like, you know, I mentioned with white, you want to be base white a lot of the time. So if you're like a blue-white base heroic deck, yeah, this card's going to be really good there. So I'm going to say blue-white heroic. 4 blue-white heroic. That's a note I'm going to make on this one. And yeah, heroic is what I put. Heroic. And probably give this a C in that deck. Anger to the Aether, excellent removal spell. This is one that I think I've seen a lot of people being caught off guard just how good this card is, because it doesn't say they can put it on the top or the bottom. You have to put it on top. So in the late game, being able to put a dorky little 2/2 or a creature that has gained a bunch of counters, like a sheep heroic creature that is really, really big, but isn't going to be good off the top of the deck. Really good. The Scry one's great. So yeah, premium removal spell. I'm going to put Anchor at B. Aetherling. Oh man, Aetherling is such a wild card. So this card, really good. One of the best rares in the set. Another one of those. And I was just curious, how good it's performing, how well it's performing on 17 lands. Currently, it's like a 62 game in hand win rate. And it just made me think, well, if it's a 62 game in hand win rate in this set, which is, about an A, which I'm going to give it an A. How good was this in Dragon's Base, where all the cards were really, really bad? This must have been just like a 70%, win rate card. Like, that format was fairly slow. A lot of the cards were kind of junky. So yeah, Aetherling, just all-star, very, very good. Once it resolves, if you've got an extra blue mana up, it's almost impossible to lose with this thing. It kills them very, very quickly, very, almost impossible to answer. So yeah, Aetherling is the real deal. Retraction Helix, another blue-white heroic card. Not a particularly awesome one. Like, this is a bounce spell that requires you to tap your creature. There's not even like any untap combos, I don't think, in this set. So yeah, I think I would just advise not putting this card in your deck. I think it's mostly like a constructed combo card. It is generally where you see the card being played. Oath of Jace is a draw 3, discard 2, which is not the worst rate in the world for a deck that's trying to fill its graveyard. You're like drawing 3, discarding 2. You're not actually going up any cards, so it's not a card advantage card, but like, synergy for graveyard decks. Kind of like a synergy D. I wouldn't want to play them most of the time, even if I am a graveyard deck. Jace Memory Adept, though. This is a hell of a card. So this is a card they included in a lot of core sets in the past, and this is like a card that people complain about over and over and over again. I mean, rightly so. It's a fairly absurd card. You just 0/0/0, and your opponent dies in 2 turns. Like, imagine playing against any deck, but especially a blue deck who's maybe already drawn some cards. You play this on turn 5. They probably have, 26, 27 cards in their library? You mill 10, they go down to 16, you mill 10 again. So, you have to get, like, 1 activation, or, have this survive 1 combat. Mill them for 20 cards, and then usually you can outlast them, and, they won't be able to win before they deck out. So, if it sticks, you win automatically. If you get in 2 activations, you're almost going to win, the vast majority of the games you play this in. And yeah, I'm just gonna give Jace an A. I think Jace is excellent. Jace, Architect of Thought, also very, very good. Not quite an insta-win Planeswalker, but, protects itself, draws you cards. Gonna have the B+. And I think is that it for, I think all these other cards are on the bonus sheet. No, Clutch Occurrence is not on the bonus sheets. Actually has underperformed a little bit. I expect this card to be a little bit better than it is. I'm actually going to give it a C-. Like, I've drafted this card fairly highly and put it in a lot of decks, and every time I've drawn it, I've been whelmed by it. I've been like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like, maybe I'll awaken it. Maybe I have a spot where I just, figure it's good to spend 1 mana, bounce their 4-drop or something, but yeah, not all that impressed. So since this is going a little bit longer than I expected, I think what I'm going to do for the rest of the colors here is just put in my grades and then just go through the list, picking out maybe some ones that are a little bit less expected. I think the ones that look good and are good, I won't call out, but maybe there's like a hidden gem here and there, or a card down here that I've seen on the battlefield a few too many times, I'll call out. I'll just start kind of going down the list. Obnix's Cruelty, I think, is probably the best common in the format. Just extremely efficient removal spell. Gets around. There's a little bit of indestructible in the format. The exile matters quite a bit. It's splashable if you're like a Gates deck or something like that. Actually, a lot of black's removal is kind of in this tier, like the B+, C+. So probably worth just going through all that, I'd say, and seeing, kind of how they all stack up against each other. Ruinous Path, also very good. I called this one out a little bit earlier. Sorcery, kills Planeswalkers. You can awaken it in the late game. In the late game, it's like a 4/4 that comes in and kills something. Night Howler is one that I've been pleasantly surprised with. Again, it's a synergy card, self-mill. you want to be filling your graveyard. But black does a pretty good job of doing that. Another card that I've been pretty impressed with is Undead Butler, which, does mill you 3 cards and gets back a card when it dies. So, that in conjunction with Night Howler, pretty nice. Some other removal spells, though. So I know, I just said we're going to talk about removal spells, and I jumped to Night Howler. But some other removal spells here. Ultimate Price. There's a lot of multicolored creatures in this format that you would like to kill. So this isn't just a awesome catch-all or anything, but just 2 mana kill a lot of creatures is still going to be very good. Basilicus Creature, one that you're probably underrating slightly, especially if you didn't play with this card back in Gatecrash. Really annoying card. Just, pecks in, drains. Extort is generally a pretty good ability. Just like having all of your cards have a small little mana sink on top of it. You have to drain the opponent for 3 or 4 points over the course of this game with this thing. So yeah, a card I'm pretty happy to play in most of my green decks. Most of my black decks. Zulapar Cutthroat. I do want to call this out, because one thing that I'm sure I'm going to call out on a future episode, maybe, I'm planning to like a card evaluation in 2025 episode next year, where we kind of just go through like, all right, here's where we are with limited magic, and here's the kind of effects that tend to be pretty good. Here's the kind of effects that tend to be pretty, overrated. And I think Zulapar Cutthroat, or this kind of effect, the drain the opponent when your thing dies, I think is generally pretty overrated. Not exactly that it's a bad effect, but I think people put this in any black deck and expect it to be good. I've seen this in a lot of like green black decks, giant green creatures. You want to be putting this in a deck where you're actively sacrificing stuff. Black whites, obviously, is going to be the prime place for that. And Tuco Husk with Zulapar Cutthroat has been pretty good, just able to drain your opponent out of the game. So just a word of caution on that card. Like I mentioned, I like Undead Butler quite a bit. I've got some card draw in here. It's pretty good. Supernatural Stamina. Do be on the lookout for decks where you've just got a lot of good enter the battlefield effects, because stamina can be really, really nasty. Just 1 mana, win a combat, retrigger. What's just like a good thing here to retrigger. So even just like cast it on something Sackathan and Tuco Husk to get a good ETB effect. I guess Ubal Sar Gatekeepers, maybe one. -2, -2. But yeah, this set is pretty stacked with enter the battlefield effects. So yeah, like I said, just keep an eye out for spots where stamina is pretty good. I'm happy to play a copy or two. Gourmet Angler is one to call out here, as I was singing the praises of Treasure Cruise. I think a 5/5 is much worse than drawing 3 cards. And I found that if you're doing the self-mill stuff, like black-green self-mill, it's fine there. It's a totally playable card. It's not like this awesome common payoff for self-milling like Treasure Cruise is. But if you are in that black-green deck, I think you really have to be going all in on that deck. Like, you want all the anglers and the Nemesis of Mortals, I think it's called, the green version of this that gets cheaper for creatures in your graveyard. The Hydras that can bomb from your graveyard as a 6/6 trampler. Like, if you've got all those cards, you really want to be playing, when we get to green. Maybe it's a conversation for green, jumping the gun a little bit, but there's like 2 mana mill some amount of cards. Basically, my point is that I don't think the delving for a big threat or getting big threats out for cheap after you've self-milled is a good thing to do, unless your entire deck is like, yes, I am turbo doing it. I found Gourmet Angler to be just a little bit underwhelming, a little bit too much work. If I'm a deck that like has some self-mill, I'll prefer often some of the other delve cards. So just thought I would call that out. And a few other things down here I want to call out. I do want to call out Liliana of the Dark Realms as a planeswalker that is not particularly good. I have it in the D- range here. I had it in the F range a minute ago, but I don't think it's absolutely unplayable. But it's mostly not good. Like, 4 mana, 3 loyalty. If you use the down tick, you kill her. If you use it right away, the plus is go get a swamp, which varies from you don't care about that at all to like fine. So yeah, if you're reading this card and be like, am I missing something on it? You're probably not. It's not a very good card. All right, moving into red now. So Gates Ablaze, probably a good one to call out here. I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but all the good Gates payoffs, if you played Ravnica Allegiance, the bangers from that set, Gates Ablaze and Gatebreaker Ram and Colossus, like these are actually some of the most winning cards in the set, like all within the top 20 right now. And yeah, I think Gates Ablaze, probably the best payoff for the Gates deck, just absurdly powerful. Like I said, I think this card's just going too late in general, so don't be the one to pass it fourth pick or whatever, to be the one to be like, oh, I should take this and move into the Gates deck potentially. Wild Slash, just a good removal spell. Crow and Crusader, this is the card that I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's been really, really impressive. The things I'm looking to target it with at common and red generally are Rimrock Knight's Adventure, Boulder Rush, and the aura here, what's called Dragon Mantle. Yeah, like kind of just like white is best when it's core white, as many white cards as you can have. Red I think kind of plays the same way. Witch's Mark, another really good thing to target your Crusader with. Witch's Mark just in general pretty good in this set, being a kind of filtering card that triggers heroic, deals your opponent a point at some point. I've been really impressed with Witch's Mark. So however good you remember Witch's Mark being in Wilds of Eldraine, bump it up a little bit. Heroic really puts this card into kind of a new territory of being a good card. Rimrock Knight, kind of the same thing. I mean, this card was good in Eldraine, but Heroic means even better here. Goblin Heel Cutter. This card is awesome. We've had a few cards like this that haven't been quite as good, like kind of riffs on Goblin Heel Cutter. There was one in like Streets of New Capenna with the Blitz mechanic. That was sort of similar, but this card, if you haven't played against it or with it, it really just changes how combat works, because your opponent doesn't expect it the first time, so they're like, okay, I'm gonna leave back one blocker, and then your opponent goes dash Heel Cutter, nope, you're taking 8 or something, and then you go, okay, well, now I have to leave back 2 things, so it's harder for me to race, I'm not dealing them damage. And then they go, all right, kill your one thing, Heel Cutter to the second one, and you're looking at your hand of like sorcery speed removal spells, and you're like, I'm just dead. Right, so I have a Goblin Heel Cutter in the B- range, and I think it deserves to be there. Just in general, actually, red has a lot of really good common creatures. Like the combo of Heel Cutter plus Crusader plus Rimrock Knight forms a really nice common base for what the red decks are doing. Another nice common creature, Gearcrafter. Another card I think is going a little bit too late. I've seen this card wheel quite a bit, and it's just very strong. Yeah, I think that's mostly it for red. Like, not a ton going on. I just kind of wanted to point out the cards that people might be underrating. I think actually there's more cards that people are underrating than overrating. Red's bad cards, I think, are like kind of obviously bad. So yeah, that's red. On to green, a few things to call out. Again, Gatebreaker Ram being a premium gate payoff. Definitely a card that I'm happy to take early. District Guide, 3 mana 2/2 that goes and gets a basic or a gate. Just gonna be a good green card in basically any green deck, but for your gates decks, just kind of a key common. Gnarlback Rhino. This is one that's really, really impressed me. I think this card is good in basically any green deck that's not a gate deck, and even in a gate deck, sometimes you just have like random fight spells that you're just like, yep, I can draw a card off my Rhino. But if you're like the green-white deck that has like Audacities and Combat Tricks, or green-red, this card can draw just like a ton of cards, and it's just super scary. Like, forget about drawing cards. You've got a 4/4 trample that you're enhancing. Like, that's a threat your opponent has to deal with. Audacity, been mentioning that one quite a bit. Been very, very impressed with Audacity. Courier's Briefcase, another one. For the Gates deck, of course. You want to be able to activate the 5 mana ability to draw 3 cards. But, sometimes I've just played this where I've got a really good 4-drop or 5-drop to ramp into, and just like this being one of my 2-drops isn't that bad. I mentioned Commune with the Gods when talking about Grimegg Angler, and the reason I call it out specifically is because it puts 5 cards in your graveyard, right? Like the 4 cards you've milled plus this. And that's a lot, right? That is really a lot of cards if you're delving or have cards that care about creatures being in your graveyard. So it's a build around C as a kind of like a role player in that black-green deck. But again, you have to be like really deep, going deep on the black-green deck. And it's not even like you can play too many copies of this card. It's a very good enabler filling your grave, but the more copies of this you play, the fewer creatures you're going to have in your deck, which then means that like your Nemesis Immortals, which is kind of one of the cards for that deck, is going to get a little bit worse because you're filling your grave up with spells instead. So yeah, just be careful. It's a card that I think you're going to play, let's say you do 20 drafts of this format, which is I think more than the average player. You might play this deck once. It's not a deck that I've been in very often. It's not a deck I've seen very often. It does require you to kind of have some sort of have a reason. You're like, oh, I want to draft this deck, and then pick up very specific pieces. I want to call out one hero in particular as not being that good, Hero of Linia Tower. This could just be that I've had some not great experiences with it, but I've had, a pretty good green-white heroic deck. And I've just found that every time you want to target, or you ask me to target with this, you're like, well, if I cast my targeting thing on curve, I don't have mana to sink into this. Like, there's a lot of situations where like Laguna Band Trailblazer, the 04, would have just been better because it naturally gets counters. I don't have to sink mana into it. So like I could see this with again, maybe like a red-green deck where you've got a bunch of like the 1 mana ways to trigger heroic. Like you've got Dragon's Mantle, the aura that comes and draws a card. You've got Rimrock Knight. Like that's probably where you want it, but not just like a generically good hero. Did want to call that out. For the multicolor section, there's only one card I want to call out. I was going through the multicolor section. I think most of the cards that are good look good, and the ones that aren't so good look not so good, or really expensive or whatever. Like feel free, of course, to go through the whole list and see if there's anything that might surprise you. But there is one I want to call out, and that is Chromanticore. Kind of looks like a meme, 5-color card, but if we learn anything from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty with the Kami War, sometimes your 5-color cards are much more than just memes and are just the best cards in the set, or some of the best cards in the set. So this, of course, is propped up by the fact that this set has a lot of really good fixing. My first draft of the format actually was a Chromanticore draft. Like, actually, Chromanticore was my first pick of drafting this format. And I do have to say that I wouldn't have given it an A+ without looking at the 17 lands data. And it is currently the top winning card in the set. I think if I were to just like naked give it a grade, I would have given it like, a build around A- or something. But it's winning at a 68% game to hand win rate on average. Now, mind you, we've got like under 1,000 games played with this card, but that is still like enough of a sample size to be directionally correct. So yeah, if you see Chromanticore, take it, start drafting the Gates decks, pick up your Courier's Briefcases and your District Guides, and yeah, card's really good. Just wrapping up here, a few colorless cards. Gate Colossus, excellent Gates payoff. I have it in the B+ range, and Pilgrim's Eye, pretty good way to fix your mana. Not as good as District Guide. I think you'd prefer a 2/2 on the ground that can trade rather than a 1/1 flyer, but yeah, I've generally been happy with Pilgrim's Eye in my 5-color decks. And yeah, a bunch of lands over here. I'm not going to cover them all right now. I hope this was fun. I hope you enjoy this. Maybe it's just something to put on the background as you do work or something. Apologies that I kind of rushed through with the last few colors there. But yeah, like I said, if I went through all of them at the pace I was going through blue and whites, I would be here for a good 3 hours. So hope you're enjoying Pioneer Masters. Let me know what kind of content you want to see in the future regarding the set. It is going to be out for another 4 weeks or so. I'm enjoying it a lot. Hope you are too. And yeah, we'll see you next time.